Well, today, this is kind of a convoluted thing. I started moving a week ago, and it was about last Sunday. I said to Nina, who's doing the prayer lab next week? Because I knew I was up, but I thought it was May. And of course, it turned out to be today. And she suggested something on darkness. And so I wanted to focus on kind of a concept called dark night of the soul, which comes from John of the Cross and is picked up by some others. And so the question, and maybe you've been this way before, but when I was chaplain, I had a resident patient when I went in to see him. And I sometimes would just say, well, how are you and God getting along today? And she said, my prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. Now, when you hear that phrase, what do you hear?
Loneliness.
Loneliness? Yeah, not being heard, you know. As a Christian in the faith journey, when you hear that, you immediately want to jump in and say what to that person?
Oh, you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, God's always there. God's always hearing you. And I knew this woman pretty well, and she was a very devout person. But she was really kind of frustrated with God that day. And we spent a lot of time, and that didn't stop for her for a long time, because her illness was not healing. She was confined to a nursing home, which is not where she wanted to be. Her prayers were bouncing off the ceiling. Can you think of a time in your life where you felt your prayers were kind of bouncing off the ceiling? And if you'd like to share that, I think it'd be helpful for those of us. I can start just to get a perspective. April 2nd, 1980, my 30-year-old wife, and we had 2 preschoolers, called me from the doctor's office and said, I'm not pregnant. They tell me I have 10 days to live if the treatments don't work. I have leukemia. I went through a long period of wondering if God was paying any attention, and especially at 2 and 3 in the morning. And the night, if any of you have had young children, the night I heard laughter coming from my year-old son's bedroom, and I thought, this can't be good. And he had filled his diapers and was doing creative artwork on the wall. I just sat down. I just sat down and I couldn't move. I'd had it. That was it. God, are you out there? You know, anybody else? What was your,
Yeah, 61 years ago today, my mother died, suddenly leaving behind us 4 kids, and I was just praying that it wasn't true. And so yeah, my prayers were, I felt betrayed, very betrayed. I was very young.
I was going to say that had to be -5. Nick, you had immediately said something. Would you be willing to share it?
Yeah, I was just gonna I jumped at what you were saying about the kids, because I have 2 young kids, that are actually in Sunday school and they're doing some choir right now, so. But so I can relate to the art
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
My kids haven't done something like that, but close. They definitely, I think all kids kind of do something similar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know, I'd say probably over the summer I was going through a period of maybe testing, I want to say fear was getting the best of me. And I prayed for every day for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then during that time, it seemed like God was just kind of sending me people who were living through a similar experience maybe, and just hearing their stories really helped.
Yeah.
And so my period of maybe testing wasn't as long as others, like maybe go years and years. So I'm very grateful and thankful for that. But God's timing for whatever 2-3 weeks was what mine was, my trials were.
Long enough.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so, but I'm always aware though, and I have the tools that I learned during that time to know when I suffer from anxiety. Like most of the time I have it's crippling anxiety. So if I don't be careful, the fear of that can get the best of me. So I have to rely on my tools that I've learned and the scriptures I've learned.
Yeah. This is not fair what I'm about to do. Can you give us one scripture that you've learned to rely on?
No.
And if you can't, that's all right.
Not off of memory.
Those of us who have memory issues understand.
Yeah.
Will you know right where it is in your Bible? I know it's on the left page, the top.
You guys, I'm just gonna be, very honest with you. I have read the Bible long enough to memorize any scriptures. I read it like in general
Sure.
stuff, but I remember there's Bible verses about trusting the Lord. So that is one that comes out to me
Yeah.
the most. So, yeah.
Yeah, Nick, I'm old enough that when I was in confirmation 60 years ago, we had to memorize. So now when I recite a Bible verse, I have to be careful because it usually comes out King James Version,
Yep.
because that's what I learned in confirmation
Yep.
that long ago. The monastics have a term for this called acedia. Kathleen Norris wrote a wonderful book on acedia
and me.
and me. And, in the monastic tradition, you pray 7 times a day formally. And then in the Benedictine tradition, you pray while working. Because Benedictines have the term ora e labora, work is prayer, prayer is work. So the whole lifestyle is shaped around prayer. And after a while, you get to the point of, if this is Tuesday, it must be spaghetti for dinner, It's the same thing over and over. And so acedia sets in, which is not really a depression, but it's a form of, looks like depression, where prayer just becomes such heavy, laborious work that they want to run away from it. And Kathleen Norris helps unpack what that is. Luther, I think it's comparable to Luther's term, which also is not translatable very well, Anfechtung. I love saying Anfechtung, but it's a time of turmoil, a time of unsettledness, a time of darkness, which Luther battled a lot.
Could I add right there that I recall reading Luther comment on prayer, went something like this: "Oh, that I could pray like the dog relishes the meat."
What an image.
I like that.
Wow.
No, that's very helpful, because I think we do have that desire. And Cliff, you just segued right into what I wanted to look at, because we get this image. When you hear the term Saint Mary or Saint Nina, when somebody has that title saint, what's the picture that comes into your head?
Old paintings of the Catholic saints.
Yeah, old paintings with little halos around the head.
Yep.
This
Yeah.
face of like peaceful contentment.
peaceful
Yeah.
contentment, and everything is holy, right?
Right.
You just see them walking around. That's why Maria in Sound of Music was just such an anomaly for the sisters, because she didn't fit the mold. Yeah. So I have for you, all right, now I'm gonna try and share the screen. It's a good thing. Oh, wait, do you have it on here?
Yeah.
Here we go. No,
You're sharing.
can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Mother Teresa has always fascinated me. I mean, an incredible story. But I read her memoirs, which I feel she was betrayed. She went to her confessor with all this stuff, and it's supposed to be kept confidential, and he writes it in a book. And so as I was reading the book, I had really mixed feelings, like I was invading her personal spiritual space. But oh my gosh, for that book for me was so powerful, because she writes about how for 50 years she prayed in darkness. When she first started as a young nun, she prayed in ecstasy, and she prayed with that full presence of God before her, and it was great joy, and her feelings were intense, and then it went away. And the book is called Come Be My Light, and I would recommend it. But this is a quote. You've got it on here, and it's on the screen. Would somebody like to read that out loud?
I can.
Okay.
Often I wonder, what does really God get from me in this state? No faith, no love, not even in feelings. The other day, I can't tell you how bad I felt. There was a moment when I nearly refused to accept. Deliberately, I took the rosary, and very slowly, and without even meditating or thinking, I said it slowly and calmly. The moment passed, but the darkness is so dark, and the pain is so painful. But I accept whatever he gives, and I give whatever he takes. People say they are drawn closer to God, seeing my strong faith. Is this not deceiving people? Every time I have wanted to tell the truth that I have no faith, the words just do not come. My mouth remains closed. And yet I still keep on smiling at God and all.
What do you hear?
That God's not listening.
She feels that, doesn't she? Yeah.
I was shocked when I found out about this reason, that she was so dark, you know?
Well, and when you read the book, that woman had to fight every step of the way because the church officials didn't want to hear her. I mean, women were not listened to, and she wanted to found this order, and they kept blocking it. So not only was she in this darkness, she was fighting the church structures, which I find interesting. What else do you hear in this?
I mean,
Doubt, sorry.
go ahead.
Doubt?
Doubt. Yep.
Yeah, where do you think that's coming from, Nick?
I think she's doubting, maybe the traditions that she was taught, or, her relationship with God.
Yeah, as I read her, it's kind of based on her feelings. She was not feeling the ecstasy. She was not feeling the presence of God. And sometimes in our prayers, we rely very heavily on our feelings. And if we don't get immediate answers, I mean, I'll even be honest here. With this being recorded, I guess it's okay. This happened in Phoenix when my wife got sick, and the hospital was about 8 miles from my home, and I had the 2 little kids at home. And one night I was driving home from the hospital about 10 o'clock at night, and I was praying, okay, God, I've been serving you in your church. I've been loving you. I've been da, 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 da. If this is the way you treat your friends, why would your enemies have any interest? That was my prayer that night. And the worst part of it is I was driving on the side of a mountain that I could have easily just, I didn't. But you can see how that darkness can take over. So what do we hear in all this? Are you totally depressed now?
Yeah.
I hear a lot of,
Let me unshare. There we go.
I know how to do that
Okay.
if she wants to see it. Do you need, okay.
I feel a lot, just by hearing like her story, and I'm sure I'm probably not accurate on this, just because of her and her experience and her wisdom, and others too though, but I hear a lot of about me, my feelings, my perspective. I don't know, in the Bible says a lot about how we need to focus on God, less self, more God, I guess is what I'm kind of getting at.
If you go back to Genesis, how did the serpent get through to Adam and Eve? Are you sure that's what you heard? Is that what God really said? Casting that doubt. In 25 minutes, we can't even begin to explore this fully. But I think whoever said this at the beginning, what got Mother Theresa through was her previous history with God. She knew God was present. She just couldn't feel God. So she kept going.
And when I read this, what I thought of reading it is this made me think of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane when
Yes.
the darkness. Is
Can you
so
hear all right?
And the pain is so painful, but I accept whatever he gives because I know this of the past. So this is what I thought, and just knowing the story of the resurrection stuff, it gave her hope. It was okay for her to have feelings of darkness and despair because Christ had the same thing.
And I kind of have that same read, and that I hear a woman whose doubts is really brought to the surface by her very closeness. She's torn and bruised by her closeness with suffering and needing in the world, and her desire to do everything in her life for the need of people and humanity and for the sake of God. And that's really the toll of dying.
Yeah, and the monastics will say, when this hits, keep praying, especially liturgy of the hours. Even if it feels empty, keep praying 7 times a day, or 5 or 4, whatever you do. It's kind of that thing, when in doubt, get up and do something. So keep praying until the Spirit fills it. And John of the Cross talks about it as a spiritual journey. And he describes it as weaning, like a baby has to wean from mom to begin to trust that mom will be there even if mom's breast is not there at that moment, that mom is still present. And so he says the dark night of the soul is when we're being weaned to not rely on feelings, but to rely on promise. And so reading John is kind of an interesting, because he has a whole desert thing that he takes you through, which we don't have time to talk about today. But if you take one thing from today before we quickly go, what is it?
We have to go to church probably.
Yeah.
What's one thing you're taking away today?
That there is a role for both the lightness and darkness in figure.
Yeah. Okay. I knew you could sum it up in 5 words. Yeah, well, this is a particular study for me because over the years I've had lots of different kinds of things happen. So I have a strong interest in this, which is why I said, okay, I'm going to try it in 25 minutes and see if we can do it. So
I really like this idea of the darkness, because you know,
okay.
anxiety's evil twin is depression. And so when I heard of this prayer about darkness, that's what came to my mind. I was like, learn something that'd be beneficial.
Well, and part of my journey has been, we'll see you, thanks, has been clinically being diagnosed as with depression and anxiety. And so I've never had to be on medicine or hospitalized, but it's a constant battle. And sometimes you wonder about, like you say, is God even out there? So it's quite the journey. And Karen, you've had quite the journey too. So I mean, you've probably experienced this.
It's fine.
Well, we're gonna charge you a cookie.
Yeah.
Wait on here.
So anyway, that's kind of where we are today. And so the prayer is, God, come be my light.